Welcome back to the home studio. Welcome to episode 8 of the Stevie Richards Show. We are going to discuss this week something maybe in the negative sense, but we're going to talk about 5-star matches. I've probably had a few negative 5-star matches, including that one from Tomko or at versus, can't even say it. It's so versus Tomko at Unforgiven. And I'm sure my co-host, who has probably had more 5-star matches than me, will probably make me do this segment. James, how are you?
Why have you suggested? Why have you suggested that I've got more 5-star matches than you when I've had 0? Are you just thinking I've got a base level of 0?
No, everybody starts out with 1, but as you wrestle, then they took mine away and then they went into the negative, right? I owe people 5-star matches. That's all.
Do you know what, right? I didn't even write this in the format. Did you ever, as a younger man, just WWE, CW, wherever it was, did you ever pay attention at any point in your life to what star rating your matches got?
Never. Didn't even know what it was for the first few years. As a matter of fact, in ECW, Meltzer had shown up backstage, and I remember people were giving this guy a dirty look, and some people were loving him. Maybe those were people to get high stars, or he wrote up on the Observer. I had no idea what the Wrestling Observer even was. This is like 95, between 95 and 96, when I started my run with Raven, and we had the tag belts, all that stuff. But I didn't know who he was. I knew he had like a turquoise or a really goofy colored Verbera jacket, so he stood out like a sore thumb. And I saw Taz and Perry and other people kind of talking to him, but Paul pulled him aside and they were talking a lot more friendly than, because Paul read up on all that stuff and he knew what the internet and ECW, the internet and the Observer and dirt sheets and things like that were extremely important to get the word out outside of the, tape trading and our video and stuff like that. So he definitely did ECW. I don't know what he reviewed and if he was positive or negative on ECW. I'm sure when it came to my stuff, obviously he was never going to be a fan because I wasn't doing the Tiger Mask International drill or anything like that. I was an entertainer. That's all I was.
Well, don't ever denigrate yourself by saying all I was. That is the entire point. That is what you were, was an entertainer, which is a very noble thing to be. So before we get into... also, this is going to be, you're probably thinking like, 5-star matches, Dave Meltzer. So it's just going to be one giant... No, as I'm sure you've noticed with the show, we're far more nuanced than the YouTube clip titles might lead you to believe sometimes. So it's not... We're going to be very sensitive to the whole 5-star thing. What makes a 5-star match? In our opinion, what makes a 5-star match? In maybe some other people's opinion, why we disagree or agree or whatever. We're going to come to... I don't even know if we're going to come to an agreement of what we believe a 5-star match is going to be, but Stevie's got his own matches that we're going to go through that he believes are 5 stars and why. So it's going to be extended whiteboard segments as well as what went right. The first what went right segments in the Stevie Richards Show history. It only took us 8 weeks to get to. We've done quite a few what went wrongs as well. But before we get into the meat of the show, we've got some plugs to do. I've got 2 books, Owen Hart and The Rock. Great books. I'm saying that, of course. Biographies of 2 of the greatest pro wrestlers of all time that also feature in our 5-star respective lists as well. And Stevie has some plugs to offer you as well as regarding fitness, Cameo, and everything else. So, Stevie, take it away.
Oh, thank you. I have Stevie Richards Fitness, which you and I have in common, certain workout programs like Athlete X. I do P90X in the past and stuff like that, but I have my own programs at StevieRichardsFitness.com. Also, what we're going to do in the description, I have some social media links. But for now, what I'm going to do is put up my bio site. It's like a link tree, all the recommended brands I have from the fitness site, my Cameo link, and also, of course, social media and the main Stevie Richards Fitness site. And I will be adding this YouTube channel as well to that bio site. So we appreciate the support. We appreciate people tuning in. Still growing, well over 35,000 subscribers, and the views are very humbling, and I'm very grateful for people continuing to spread the word about the Stevie Richards Show.
Yeah, a few days ago as well, I posted a community post saying what you, the fans, want to see in this show, and we got... when did I post it? Monday? I can't remember when I posted it. We've got like 200 replies, and quite a lot of the people have said stuff that we've already got coming in the pipeline as well. Some interesting ideas as well that we're going to integrate into future shows as far as segments go. But for this week, we're talking about 5-star matches. Dave Meltzer yesterday, as we record this, so this is a Wednesday, this will be out on Friday, of course. As of last night, as we record this, went on another Twitter rampage arguing with fans. So that's come up with some great content for later on when we're going to be talking about what makes a 5-star match that in wrestling, Dave Meltzer didn't come up with. I believe that, I can't remember the guy, he's one of Jim Cornette's friends who apparently brought in the star rating system, which was 1 to 4 and then ends up being 1 to 5. But Dave Meltzer very much popularized it, and there are various different opinions on what makes a 5-star match. Stevie has come up with a list of his own, which will also be incorporating some of the big moments in those matches on the whiteboard as well. So, Stevie, are you going to be heading to the whiteboard now, or are we going to do a bit of a sort of intro of what these matches are? Because I only know half of them.
And let's go back and forth, because I think Chris can B-roll in what I feel is 5-star match criteria to give people a little bit of a preview as we look at these. And the great news is you have an amazing list of matches that I would consider and agree with as 5 stars or memorable matches in general. I have 12, but like I said, the good news for us and wrestling fans, past, present, and future, you almost have to sit down and do binge watching or a marathon to find some of the greatest moments and matches in wrestling history. And I think that speaks to how awesome pro wrestling can be as not only sports, but also entertainment. I want to make this point about Meltzer because it's so popular and easy to kind of make fun of him, goof on him and everything. But this guy has put an incredible amount of work in over decades. He's constantly shown up. You can call it a Jedi mind trick that he kept showing up as the wrestling journalist, but he has shown up. He's done one of the hardest things that you've probably ever had to do, which is write long essays and long articles and a newsletter and do it consistently all the time. Writing is one of my weak points. That's why I love editing videos. It's an extremely hard thing to get a point across and do it for, he's got to be going on 40 years now. I'm not exactly sure the year he started. Al Snow is great at putting these two things. He's probably one of the most, if not the most informed fan in wrestling history. Also, you can use this sarcastically, but I mean it on the up and up. He is the greatest worker ever in the history of the business. For somebody that's never taken a bump, never gotten to the ring, and I don't begrudge anybody. There's a market that has paid him for the Wrestling Observer newsletter and then some like $12 a month for the audio and video version of the newsletter. But to do that and sustain that, we know, hey, 8 episodes in, we're still trying, okay, do we have legs? Does it have traction? This dude's been doing it for multiple decades. So you need to give him credit for that. It's easy to goof on him and say whatever, and we're going to get into some of these arguments that are quite baffling on Twitter. But yeah, I give him credit, and nobody does that with any of these people. And that includes other dirt sheets that have been around, other people that interview, whatever style it might be. They goof on that Denise girl, on Ross Sapp, and everybody else. But these people, they would, if they weren't making money and they didn't have their niche in an audience that supports them, they would be, thinned out. But they're not. So good. We just want a piece of that.
We'll be talking about Dave Meltzer later. But as far as your 5-star matches go, are we going to be doing this in order of date, or just order of which you like them, or just what order you thought of them?
I did not want to rank any of these, James, because they all have equal impact, either personally for me as a child, personally for me as a worker, and now as a retired wrestler. They have, it's sometimes even more things that I can appreciate, kind of like the Brett versus the Shawn thing. I said, I love Shawn as a worker, and he's the reason I got into the business. But with this current job and project of analyzing, breaking down nuanced detail, I have so much more of an appreciation for the little things that Brett does in each and every move. So we can do an entire 10 years on what went right videos with Brett. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. So there's no ranking. There's no number 1 to number 12. They all have equally memorable moments, memorable matches, memorable cards. And one of the criteria is number 1 right here, as Chris puts it up in the B-roll. Number one, drawing money, the amount of money drawn on that show, and if that match was responsible, which usually it is, for that money being drawn. Number two, I just said it, creating memorable moments or just that one moment. That's all it takes. But some of these have multiple moments within their match, not even in the build-up storyline, which is also very important. Number three, the storyline leading up to the match. The anticipation to see when these guys or girls finally get into the ring, what will happen. That's what, I mean, that's Dusty Rhodes. That's Shawn Michaels. That's a whole bunch of people. That's The Rock, Austin. They could talk the people into the building, literally, or in this case, a lot of these are actually stadiums. All right, number four, the historical reference. In other words, did this match alter the course of wrestling history? Did this create a new era, create a new look? Did this save the company? Did this put the company on a level never seen before? I feel like these four, and there's many more, pieces of criteria, but I think these are the four pillars, to use an AEW term, of my 5-star match analysis.
I came up a couple of days ago on Twitter, and I came up with 5. So you tell me, and I have probably painted myself into a corner that I couldn't think of a single match that actually, maybe one or two, that would qualify for all 5. Is number 1, getting everybody over in a match, more so than they were before. Number 2, fan anticipation and reactions. That goes to your point of build-up. Number 3, drawing huge money on the day. That's an easy one. Number 4, the match leading to increased business/ticket sales/viewership afterwards. And number 5, long-term company growth caused in part by that match.
Yeah, I think I condensed those down. Those are excellent points to kind of intersect with mine. A historical reference is kind of a all-in-one catch-all of the things we talked about, that certain moments, and we'll talk about when we go to the whiteboard, the one moment I think saved WWE from going out of business. One particular moment when one match, and I think everybody knows what that is, and it involves people that, we've compared to in the past. So there's your little teaser on that. So is there anything else as far as, you have a list of stuff here that you're going through and everything? Did you want to get to the Meltzer stuff first, or you want to go to the whiteboard?
No, let's do the whiteboard first. Let's talk about your how many matches did you pick? Was it 12?
12. Yes.
Right. You only sent me 1, 2, 3, 4.
I know. I
5,
want to
6,
surprise you with it. I'm not going to give you it all.
Oh, good.
You got that botch reaction video. I have to give you a receipt somehow.
Sorry, I was doing the botch face there. This is all good stuff. Some of the favorite things on our show is when live, as we're doing this, I'm like, hey, this will make a clickbait title. Here's a thumbnail. They're like, we're literally doing pre and post production on the show. Well, I like to give I don't know, I like to condense things. So if you're going to... Oh, right, you're off to the whiteboard already. While Stevie's off to the whiteboard, he also wrote down for certain matches the gate and the buy rate as well. So I'll be looking forward to I'm looking forward to exactly what you picked, indeed. So over to you, Stevie, and the whiteboard. Take it away.
Thank you, James. What we're looking at right here is a list of 5-star matches like we talked about when we were sitting down. I have 12 here. I told you about 6. The other 6 will be your reaction to what they have out there. You'll find out when everybody else does out there. But as I said with my criteria about drawing money, storyline, all that stuff, this is the criteria where I picked 12. Now, there's a lot more than 12, and that's the best part about being a pro wrestling fan. You have more than 12, way more than 12. We could be doing episodes, so hopefully this will be a continuing series. Comment below and let us know if you want to see further videos of more 5-star matches. Obviously, people want to see probably the worst matches in wrestling. Well, I was part of a few of those, but let's just talk about these. Number 1, not ranked, just our first 5-star match, WrestleMania 18, Rock versus Hogan, attendance 68,237, a gate of $3.9 million. Just to remind anybody out there about this, remind everybody out there, I should say, we are going to have a What Went Right segment featuring some of the most memorable moments from some of these 5-star matches, including Rock versus Hogan, where they did the famous kind of scanning the crowd, the face-off, looking right, looking left, looking back at each other, and people actually popped for the bell ring. For the bell ring, the people came up on their feet. And the interesting part about this was, you go back and watch it if you haven't watched it. If you haven't watched it, shame on you. Rock was a babyface. Hogan was the leader of the New World Order, not the Blue World Order, the New World Order, the real one. And he was a heel. And they had tried to eliminate The Rock by driving a tractor trailer into his ambulance after they beat him down. So basically, you figure Rock would be coming out like the #1 babyface and Hogan would be hated. But Pat Patterson, at least the story I heard, was very aware how much the Toronto crowd, the Canadian crowd, loved Hulk Hogan, and sometimes they would do the opposite of what they should. They would hijack the show. So they prepared for Hogan being a babyface and Rock being a heel, and that's what makes this match so memorable, besides the fact you got Hogan, a star in the 80s and the 90s, against the new generation, the Attitude Era, Rock. So it was eras, it was generations coming together to battle in this match. So that's why I feel like that was a 5-star match, besides just these two numbers right here, which are really incredible for the time. Next one, I think everybody's going to know why I picked this. Survivor Series 1997, the Montreal Screwjob. Everybody remembers that moment. The sharpshooter on Brett. Brett goes to turn it around. Before that happens, Hebner rings the bell. Earl Hebner calls for the bell, and then Brett ends up spitting on Vince, spitting right in his face, and destroying everything and doing the WCW thing. Did I do it backwards? I'm not even sure. He did it right, so he knew what he was doing. Attendance, 20,593. We could not find the gate number, so if anybody could comment below with how much money was drawn at the gate. But I said it when we sat down, James. This moment right here, I believe saved the WWE from going out of business. Because basically Austin was a part of that too, but I'm saying this moment had people talking. This moment here created the evil Mr. McMahon character, the greatest heel in wrestling history. And if Mr. McMahon wasn't created off of this, Steve Austin would not have been the babyface and would not have a viable heel to make him one of the most over baby faces in wrestling history. So that's why I feel like this is a pivotal moment, maybe in all of wrestling history, but definitely in the survival and then the thriving of the WWE after that. So go right here. WrestleMania 13, Brett versus Austin. Once again, we have a moment here that makes two guys. Right here, we're going to go through the attendance and gate. 8,197. This was in Chicago. I miss these smaller WrestleManias, like in the intimate, like here or Boston or the Garden, and they still drew a gate of $837,150. So this was the infamous double turn. Austin was a heel, but the fans were cheering him. Brett was a babyface that was still kind of a babyface, but a little bit lukewarm with the reaction. Austin was definitely getting more reactions, and we're going to talk about it in the What Went Right segment with this, with Shawn and Hogan. These are going to be part of that What Went Right whiteboard segment with video. But here, Brett has him in the sharpshooter. Special referee Ken Shamrock, a whole entire different thing there that was cool post-match with Brett. Austin did not give up. He was in the sharpshooter an insane amount of times, and Brett is known to kind of torque that sharpshooter, so I give him credit. So he may have really passed out, for real, because he passed out and he didn't give up. So therefore, got Austin way more over as a babyface. Also, the famous shot of Austin pushing up, trying to get out of the sharpshooter with the blood pouring down his face, his teeth turning blood red. Just a moment in history that cannot, I got goosebumps just thinking about it. That's awesome. Next one, more recently, Cody versus Roman. This is WrestleMania 40. This is a rematch. This is where the story was finished. The ending of this match, we don't have any video footage of this because, quite frankly, the last 7 to 9 minutes, whatever it is some of the best, most perfectly booked finishes that I've ever seen. So here we have a combined gate over 2 days. And I was one that was a doubter of the 2-day WrestleManias. But these figures right here, I'm happy to be wrong. 145,298 people over the course of 2 days. And they drew $38.5 million. That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible and deserves, besides the match being awesome. The way it was booked, the way it was worked, Cody and Roman are two of the greatest workers in the company, maybe in history, and that's why they drew that right there. Obviously, Rocky and everybody around that match also drew as well and contributed, but these guys had to do the match. So they drew just based off of this story. Next one, here you go, James. SummerSlam. Bret versus Bulldog for the Intercontinental title. $78,927, $3.65 million gate. Now, here's my question. After he won the match, did Bulldog tattoo that attendance number onto his arm?
He should have done.
Should have. Maybe this year. So this is what they drew, and this was 1992, correct, James?
992.
92. 3.6 Philly. These numbers, I mean, obviously this number is current, but these numbers like this one, and we're going to get down to WrestleMania 3 in a second, I want to adjust that for inflation. So maybe Chris can put in 3.65 million, use the inflation calculator for 2024. My guess is with inflation, this could be considered an almost $10 million house. I'm just averaging it, but my God, and then even more impressive number is when it comes down to WrestleMania 3. By the way, we have footage that we're going to show them what went right for Bret versus Bulldog, as well as Hogan versus Andre. WrestleMania 3, the opening of the match was almost the quickest match in history, where Hogan tried to slam Andre. Andre fell on him, and it was that 1, 2, maybe 3 count. I don't know if it was booked. I don't know, because Andre was so big that Hogan had trouble getting the shoulder up. It's just one of those wrestling urban legends that we'll probably actually do a show on wrestling urban legends and conspiracies. 93,173. By the way, some of these attendance numbers, like this one, people say differently. There's different WWE's numbers and then the official numbers, or turnstile numbers, I believe they call it, like they did with Wembley with AEW. $1.6 million house right there. I don't know what he did there. $1.6 million house. And then when we come down here, this is why I put this in here and not the other ones, because I wasn't sure. $10.3 million in pay-per-view buy rates in 1987. Adjusted for inflation, I can't imagine what that number is. That's incredible. Now, you ready for the next 6 to surprise you?
Well, do you know, just before you go to that, Stevie, while you were discussing all those matches, I was frantically finding out what Dave Meltzer had ranked every single one of those matches. I've got an answer for every single one of them.
Thank you.
So what was the top one again? Was that Hogan Rock?
Rock Hogan. What did Meltzer rate it?
You guess first.
3.5 stars.
3 stars.
Wow, even worse than that. Bret versus Shawn, I'd say 3.5.
3 3/4. Do you know what? Until the ending,
nobody's going to break 4 stars in this, are they?
Keep going. Keep going.
Bret versus Austin, I would say 4.
5.
Good. Good man. Cody versus Roman, 4.
4 3/4.
Let's just round. Give them 5 stars. Like
I know.
Bret versus Bulldog, I would give this 5 stars.
4.5 for Dave.
Really? They give Bret versus Bulldog a lower rating than Cody versus Roman?
Yeah. So he did. I mean, I know you'd say these are all 5 stars, but okay. And the most interesting
Hogan.
one, Hulk Hogan versus Andre.
Well, because Savage and Steamboat, also a 5-star match on the show, but didn't draw the house, as Al Snow would argue, and I would agree with him. I'd say 2.5 stars.
-4. Your screen is not frozen, ladies and gentlemen. That's Stevie Richards' brain has frozen from that review.
All right, I'm okay. All right, I have to give him credit again. Dave Meltzer was a troll before trolls were even known on social media. He's got to be trolling. Can you bleep this out? What
I can bleep something out.
What the f are you thinking? Where the f did that come from? I need a drink.
So before your head explodes, let's go to the next 6 then. I'm going to do the same thing. So while you're explaining it all, I'm going to find out what Dave Meltzer voted them or ranked them. Wait.
I mean, are you f***ing serious? A -4? F*** off. That's my British right there. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's going to be even worse. WrestleMania 6, Warrior versus Hogan. I'm sure it's got -10 stars right here. Attendance 67,678, a gate of $3.9 million. Here we have babyface versus babyface, title versus title. Build up from Royal Rumble. This is the most proper build up of any main event in WrestleMania history. I believe so. It was the old Rumble. One of them didn't even win the Rumble. Like Warrior didn't win the Rumble to get the title shot. It was just purely storyline based. Everything here was booked to perfection, and Hogan could say whatever he wants, but it was a smart move to put Warrior over Hogan. Never in WWE history, at the time WWF, did they ever promote a babyface versus a babyface match. This was truly a taboo type of match, taboo storyline that drew money. It drew money. So this is my 5-star. What does he say? Do you want me to sit down?
3.75. Let me just say this actually, Stevie, with that, and I'm sorry to interrupt the list, but it wasn't the first time that WWF or WWF had been, promoted on a big show, babyface versus babyface. I think there was, very famously, there was Bruno Sammartino versus Pedro Morales, and they did a couple more, super shows, maybe like an earlier showdown at Shea or whatever, with babyface matches. The problem is that they didn't really draw. I mean, they drew a decent house, of course, but the fact was that the matches were always a bit of a letdown because back in those days, you loved them both. You don't cheer for anyone. So that's why the WWF did it so infrequently. And until, I'd argue, Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior, they never got the formula right.
No, and the stage of WrestleMania is a lot different. Those Shea Stadium shows, or some of the shows they did in New York and outdoor venues, I think they even did a huge Puerto Rico show as well in WWE in a stadium. But for WrestleMania or modern era storyline TV pay-per-view, this was still uncharted territory. I wasn't aware of the Bruno Pedro thing. But then again, back then, these two were very strong baby faces that they were in storyline still kind of helping each other out, but becoming a little bit more aggressive towards each other. It was just, you got to watch from Rumble. They probably have a big package leading up then. And of course, the Ultimate Warrior promo about putting Hogan in the airplane and having the airplane crash as he takes the controls. That was a bit heelish, but it was the Warrior. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it that got him over. So I still believe here because it created a moment, and it also, Hogan put somebody over right there, putting somebody over clean, even though he kind of kicked out. We have a video footage of this as well. He kicked out on 3 like Mr. Hughes used to do all the time in ECW. He kicked out right on 3 to keep himself over. This was the passing of the torch. And I think Vince did a good thing by trying to at least experiment with the Ultimate Warrior era. They claim he didn't draw, he didn't do whatever, but Warrior was probably the only guy that was anywhere near as over as Hogan at the time. So, like Vince famously does, let's end this before it actually does jump the shark. So I think he was thinking Hogan's here, and little did he know Hogan had another few decades left in him. But this is definitely, I think this is, and I watched this as a kid, and this is one of the matches that made me want to be a wrestler. That solidified me wanting to be a pro wrestler. All right, next.
Let me just add one more thing to that as well. With Warrior and Hogan, it had a finish. It had a definitive finish as well. Whereas the other babyface versus babyface mega matches, maybe Bob Backlund and Harley Race, I can't remember if they were both babyfaces as an example. They always went to a double count out or a DQ or time limit draw. And I think that was another thing that the fans probably picked up on, that they knew, especially if it was going to be a quote unquote unification title match, NWA and WWF, you knew they weren't getting, unified.
You knew you were going to, you just knew you were going to get robbed an actual finish because both baby faces still needed to stay over. Maybe you couldn't formulate that in your head, but deep down the fans know, well, there's going to be a DQ because they can't sacrifice one of their beloved baby faces in the company. But here they actually did. You're right. Vince was brave enough to pull the trigger and not, I think that the Toronto crowd they might have rioted if you gave him like anything less than a solid finish. That's just my opinion. So moving on. All right, Survivor. Oh, I put the wrong, I messed up. We'll update that. That's WrestleMania. WrestleMania in Orlando, Florida. Flair versus Shawn. This is a retirement match, by the way. If Flair loses, he retires. So the stakes automatically and the storyline are right there. Attendance, 74,635. Drew a gate of $5.8 million. I think everybody remembers the moment. And we'll have a video whiteboard segment into what went right. I'm sorry, I love you. Super kick, sweet chin music. Immediately after the cover, cradles Ric Flair and just talks to him and tells him how much he loves him. One of the greatest moments, not just in WrestleMania history, but all of wrestling history. What does Dave make? He's got to give this 5 stars.
Is that what your guess is?
That's what my hopeful guess is.
3.5.
Okay. Next.
Do you know the funny thing about the Flair thing is that everyone knew that it was heading towards WrestleMania. There was a match with MVP, I think, at this is 2008, at the Royal Rumble, and everyone knew that Ric Flair was going to win it. But it doesn't matter. Everybody knew that he was going to retire at WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels was going to win. There was like no doubt, and it doesn't matter. Which I know I always bring up Dutch Mantel, but it's like, you know what? You promise something to the fans, then you give it to them.
Yeah, this isn't
explicitly promised.
This isn't the time for a Russo swerve. You gotta go straight. Occam's razor, the simplest explanation and path. The direct path is the way to go. All right. WrestleMania 25, Taker versus Shawn, 72,744, a gate of $6.9 million. You could lump in like you did on the show notes, James. Next year in Arizona, WrestleMania 26, they literally topped it. They topped it from there. So this here is a great show, but that it shows how these guys can have a great match, great chemistry. They've wrestled Hell in a Cell. They've wrestled since right in the beginning of the Attitude Era to here, and their matches were always fresh. They always had something new. And then back-to-back WrestleManias to still be a draw, and still, that was the one WrestleMania in Arizona where Shawn, once again, a retirement match. This is why I love this too. Flair retirement match, Shawn beats him. Then Shawn's turn to put his career up on the line, and Taker beats him. The streak versus the career, which I feel like right there was probably one of the fewest times that there really was a toss-up. And I don't know if it was toss-up creatively, but there was a toss-up because is Shawn really going to retire? He still works great. He looks great. Or is it finally going to be the end of the streak? I think fans went into that match legitimately not knowing the next year one, not this one, legitimately not knowing who was going to win the match.
Both matches got the exact same rating. I think both 4 3/4.
All right. I can't say I'm surprised at this point, but that's okay. All right. WrestleMania 28. This is the first time they've had this match. Rock versus Cena, 78,363, $8.9 million house. They repeated the match, WrestleMania 29, and that's why I'm not going to give it to them again. We're not going to do repeats of that, or we would have two right here in this box for both WrestleManias, which I should have did because each Taker versus Shawn match is a wrestling clinic. Rock versus Cena is just a big fight feel. I didn't use that yet, but Rock versus Cena has the big fight feel. So that's where I put that. So what did I'm sure this got to have a Hogan Andre star rating. That's my guess.
3 3/4.
Really? Is the 3.5, 3 3/4 or 4 3/4 kind of still kind of trolling? Like you're not going to give me 5. Almost just give the other quarter star to get it to a 4 or 5. I don't know. I mean, obviously, like technically, they're special people anyway. They're great workers. Are they great wrestlers? No, but a lot of great workers are not great wrestlers. That's Kurt Angle. By the way, we left Kurt Angle off because we are going to dedicate an entire show for how underrated Kurt Angle is to this day. And I wish I was as shredded as him. He must be doing Athlete X. We got to get back to doing that, James. So people are going to get mad about this. WrestleMania 29, Punk versus Taker. Rock versus Cena with the rematch was a big draw for the rematch. But this here, dude, this is a 5-star match up and down, and Taker and Punk together, 2 different sizes, but still be able to work because Punk is smaller than Shawn in some ways, but to be able to work Taker and hang with him is awesome. 80,767, $12.3 million house. I give credit to Rock and Cena or the entire card. You came back the next year with the same main event and drew almost $4 million more at the gate. Not to mention the buy rates are probably really good. But this here, I think it was the week before, the go-home show, when Punk took the urn and basically poured it on Undertaker after hitting him with it. And this was after Paul Bearer passed away. And Paul Bearer would have loved the fact that they used him passing away as part of a storyline for this match. And obviously Paul Heyman, who kind of looks like Paul Bearer now, more like Paul Bearer than Paulie Dangerously, he dressed up like Paul Bearer as well. So a lot of heat going into this match. Did I think Punk was going to end Taker's streak? I didn't quite know, James, because Punk, nobody thought he would win the world title multiple times. Nobody thought he'd be a main eventer. Nobody thought. So I wasn't sure if they were going to really like strap the Rocket to Punk and really give him that right there. Also, I think what made me think that they weren't going to do that was, even though you couldn't go last after the main event of Rock and Cena, if Punk was going over, I think they would have repositioned him on the card to create that moment. So it kind of gave away that Taker was going to go over, but this is an awesome match. What did Meltzer give it?
4.5 stars. It's funny how this match actually ends up being one of the catalysts for Punk leaving because he wasn't in the main event and The Rock was.
And he didn't get paid. Well, his famous thing was then if he had gotten paid like he was in the main event, I think he would have quieted it down a little bit. Because I did during that podcast where he got all in trouble with the Colt Cabana thing, he said that right to Hunter, then pay me like I'm in the main event. It's a good point, isn't it? Because Triple H said, well, you are in the main event. You're wrestling Taker. And it's like semantics, you know what I mean? All right, next.
Yeah, keep in mind that Triple H was the one who put himself above. He actually campaigned to put himself above The Rock and Hollywood Hulk Hogan in that same event. Let's not forget when he wrestled Jericho in that far less than stellar match.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
They were fighting over the custody of a bulldog, and that was that was the build-up. Sorry, it's the build-up for Triple H and Stephanie, and Jericho also happened to be there.
I remember that. Yeah, they really cut Chris, as you know what, off during that time as champion and just made him a lackey. And kind of a middleman or a third wheel type thing. Is that what you're talking about? Where it's just like
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
title had nothing to do with it. I did give you 11, but it works out better anyway. You know why?
Go on.
I just want to piss Meltzer off some more. Hogan versus Andre again. I mistakenly put that in there, but I only have 11 for you. That's it. Sorry, I said I had 12. False advertising. Sorry. So that's my 11 right now. But I'll tell you the truth. This can go into the 3 figures of matches like this throughout wrestling history. And I think that's a good thing for fans of any age, any sort, to go back and watch these. But there's going to definitely be more 5-star matches in the future, or as Meltzer would put it, negative 4.5-star matches that I look forward to watching in the future.
So there's one criticism that I can immediately see people looking at that list and coming up with, and that is that they are all WWE matches. None from WCW, TNA, AEW, Japan, anything like that.
Well, what I looked at, and the criteria is really important. Now, obviously, there have been huge houses. I debated putting everybody's favorite guy, CM Punk, in this because he drew a $1 million house. Nobody remembers the show because they remember the press conference. You know, it's called Brawl Out after that Chicago show. But I think it's sort of I hate to say false positive, but you draw $1 million house, you draw $1 million house, but they were going to his hometown. He's a big Chicago guy. They come out to support him. As a matter of fact, there was a time where they were going back to Chicago, how many times just beating that city up, shaking the people upside down for their money. And that's one thing right there. Were there 5-star matches? That's why I said there were so many 5-star matches, but with the criteria, you know, you could put Wembley in that. I've rewatched the MJF Adam Cole match. And I believe, even though they drew a ton of money and people at Wembley for the AEW, I think it was All In, correct?
Yeah, I was there for that.
You were there. What I'm looking at is that drew the house and that drew the money based on the novelty of AEW's first show in England, in Wembley, big stadium. It wasn't the match. It wasn't any particular match that drew that house. It was the AEW coming to Wembley Stadium for the first time. Now, this time around, you said they're drawing the same gate because they've raised the ticket prices, but the attendance is cut in half. And we don't even know what matches. See, that's the thing. They could be promoting Wembley with a big match, a storyline, or something. Are there any matches advertised for Wembley?
Yeah, there's a few. The biggest one is Swerve Strickland versus Bryan Danielson. The problem is the build-up is absolutely doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then the Tony Storm and Mariah May match, that build-up it had a strong angle, which you remember a few weeks ago, where Mariah May's got Tony Storm on the ramp and like bloodies her up with the heel of the shoe. And then ever since then, it just doesn't. Almost the build-up is almost like petered out. They keep trying to build up to it, but it's not hitting the mark.
Yeah.
So there's no one big match that everyone's saying, "God, we've got to be there." There's MJF and I think there's MJF and Will Ospreay as well for the international title.
Yeah, but they just had that match on TV for free.
Oh yeah, they're giving it away again. They're having the rematch.
But do you see what I mean? The anticipation for that match should have been all along, and then people would pay to see it. They've already seen it, and they won an hour. And now I have no doubt both guys can top it in a way, but it's kind of like seeing it, now it's over. What's next? I would say this too. I was going to put, but with the criteria, it doesn't qualify right now. The best of 3 series, or the 3-match series, I should say more specifically, between Samoa Joe and Punk and ROH. Those matches are awesome. I enjoy watching those. Daniels, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, TNA Sacrifice, one of the best technical, one of the most exciting matches I've ever seen. But did it draw these numbers? And was it a storyline? These things, if I take some of the criteria away, there's going to be even more 5-star matches in that. Let me think what else. Malenko Guerrero Classic in ECW. But did it draw this? That's what I'm looking at. There's plenty of 5-star matches. I would even say, just trying to think, New Japan, Okada, Kenny Omega, all their matches. I know Meltzer Radio. They're all just technically with the match. five stars, or as he says, 5+ or 6 or 7 or 8. But I could not see how much money it drew, what the gate was. Obviously, Tokyo Dome shows are going to draw. But what kind of storyline am I looking at? What? Just the best? And then you have 3 matches? That I put up 4 main criteria, and I was forced to eliminate matches that I truly enjoy still watching, like Omega Okada, Punk Joe, Joe Daniels, AJ. AJ and Abyss had some amazing matches in TNA. There's tons of them. Randy Orton has been part of a lot of them, but not in a position where these guys were in to draw the house. So I begrudgingly eliminated matches that my personal bias wanted to put them in, but according to those 4 bullet points of criteria, they get eliminated.
Okay. As promised, Stevie's making his way to the whiteboard once again, the smartboard, to talk about what went right in a couple of his personal 5-star favourite matches. So, Stevie, what match are we going to be starting off with?
All right, thank you, James. We're going to take a look at 2 specific moments that we talked about from our 5-star match list. Here we have SummerSlam 1992, Bulldog and Brett. And you would think, oh, it's just one of the regular roll-up pins. Not a big deal. They're not going to pop. This was one of the best finishes I've seen right here. Sunset flip right here. And as he comes down here, Bulldog hooks the legs. And you want to talk about a super tight pin right there. Look at that. Brett made sure, hook, lean forward, plant your head in the mat, and Brett can't get out of it. Essentially, Brett, I know, he called the whole match. There's history behind this match we won't get into. But here we go, 1, 2, 3, and look at the people. One of the best technical wrestling matches I've ever seen, and emotion right here. Look at that Wembley Stadium. Were you anywhere there, James? Little baby James?
I was, no, one of my friends was. He was 10 years old, and 9 years old, and he said he remembers 2 things from that night. The Undertaker came down on a hearse, and Legion of Doom came down on motorbikes.
Which Animal burned? He got off on the wrong side and ended up burning his boot to his leg. Little fun fact there. All right, so this was an amazing moment right here. Look at nobody does it like WWE with the crowd and everything, but going back to the pin real quick, just sunset flip into a tight cradle right there. You can't get any more technical than that, and that's all Brett. Bulldog really, really over too, and obviously going over in England is going to be huge. Came to the ring with Lennox Lewis, which was his first real exposure before Lennox Lewis was the Lennox Lewis that we know in America, at least. So really cool stuff. All right, next we have Hogan versus Warrior, WrestleMania 6. By the way, the video is flipped, although Hogan could be ambidextrous. I don't know. But in this case, boot with the left leg right there. I just laughed when I flipped that there. Now, the reason why this moment is incredible is no one kicked out of the Hogan leg drop, and Hogan never missed the leg drop as far as I knew. But here we go. Hogan's going to run. Ambidextrous, left-handed. Oh, he missed. That's why he missed it. He used his left leg right there. But after that, right into the splash. And 1, 2, 3. Look at the people. Once again, and Hogan and Warrior right up there. 5-star match. Awesome stuff. Go back to the pin here. Just the fact that Hogan missed the leg drop off the bat. Now, this is after Hogan hulked up after the Warrior press slam. So they both were very generous with their finishes. And this was a Pat Patterson match that he booked. And it was quite obvious because Halloween Havoc, when they rematched, Pat wasn't there to help him. This was one of the best matches these guys have ever had. And then they had the worst one. This is Warrior's quote. The worst.
I want to add a couple of things. One, I was hoping that you would analyze the test of strength where Ultimate Warrior's on his knees and then the cat.
No, we don't want to get any kind of like, it's not for kids anyway, but we didn't want to get any extra, we'll save that for Patreon or OnlyFans.
Yeah. Here's one other thing is, I always found it weird as a kid that Ultimate Warrior had a splash as a finisher. And I was like, that's always a fat man wrestler finisher. So why does Ultimate Warrior have to splash as a finisher? Just because it's so simple?
Yeah, it's so simple and probably real because mostly everything he did was real. So he probably knocked the wind out of you for 3 seconds. But Hogan, obviously, 2 9/10. The Fire Pro Wrestling kick out at 9/10, 2.99.
Stevie, I shared with you, I mean, I was in a rush up and down this morning, so I didn't write everything that I wanted to, but I wrote down a huge amount of matches, and this is purely from an artistic point of view, a 5-star match. And the first one that I always have to put up there that I just never ever think gets enough love is Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, the cage match at SummerSlam 1994. And what is so fantastic about it is they are working in a framework of limitations. No blood, no weapons, and it is escape only. And I think that makes for a more wonderful match. Like when you've got that pressure cooker of expectation, and then you have limitations, but only limitations put upon you. Only the very best can work within those limitations and make something even better out of it.
Yeah, and also 2 guys, and the Bret versus Owen at WrestleMania 10 was also on the list, but it wasn't the main event of the show. But, that's why that kind of got disqualified with that criteria. I'll say this. Number one, they're working in the big blue cage, which hurts like hell, not a regular cage. They put on a wrestling clinic in a cage match, and people didn't crap on it. They loved it. It was crazy. I mean, Bret versus Owen, for whatever is said, I mean, Taker and Kane kind of rehashed that with their brother versus brother. This here had the realest family feud. I mean, the Hart family and then the Smith family and the Neidharts. And I mean, it was the biggest family angle I've ever seen in my life. It's crazy how it spiderwebbed out, came back. And of course, then Bret turns heel with that double turn at WrestleMania 13. Now there's a whole new twist with the Hart Foundation and bringing I mean, that was just an amazing time. I get goosebumps now. It's awesome when you can be in the business for that long, recall something, and it just brings back those memories. I love pro wrestling for that.
Do you know, the only match that I think of and it gets me goosebumps every time is Undertaker Mankind Hell in a Cell, because it is a 5-star performance. It is a 5-star match, and the reason it's a 5-star match is because it gives me that same feeling. It's 26 years later, and I remember the feeling that I had the first time I watched it, and it doesn't die down. In fact, the older I get, the more I know how much everything hurts. Do you know what I mean? And you just think, how could and that match went into that pay-per-view cold. That was as cold a match with a build that nobody cared about, and it's one of those things where Russo just went, Hell in a Cell, let's just do that. And I figure it was just one of those things where we need to do something to sort of spice it up a bit. But the build was nothing. In fact, Mick Foley was cold. He just got off a two pay-per-view main event run with As Dude Love. Then they switched him characters again. No one cared about Mankind. Then all of us, and here's the kicker. Here's the biggest kicker. Nobody cared about Mankind afterwards until about 6 weeks later. It took about 6 weeks for the true impact of that match to sort of hit people. And then at the same time, Mick Foley then starts adding more character and starts becoming goofy, and then he wears the shirt to appear more corporate, and he's trying to get more involved with Vince McMahon. And that's what gets him to the next level. Not that match, but the match could have, in a weird way, saved his career in the sense that he wasn't bumped down to the mid-card or the upper mid-card.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And that's another match that was on my 5-star list. It really was. But like you said, the build to it was nothing. So that eliminated it somewhat. I'll say this, that was a blessing in disguise, because if Mick, he legitimately got hurt, obviously, and needed weeks off to recover from it. And Mick probably knew, he's smart enough to know, I need to do something to get figured back into this, or at least get attention back on what I'm doing. And if he didn't have those weeks and weeks off with the promo time and forced to be, or not even forced, but, pivoting to be a little goofier and more comedy, dude, Mr. Sacco would not have been born if that match didn't happen. That's my hot take on that. Because there would have been no reason for him to show the character. He would have just kept doing his stuff.
He actually returned after like 2 weeks and then was just lost in the shuffle. And then, it's funny the happenstance of, he went from nowhere directionally to really the main event of WrestleMania 15, or, because he was the referee in that one. But I'm going to read out some more matches. We can't talk about them all. We can't really talk about any of them. I'm just going to name some that I remember as a kid, because obviously you remember in your formative years the matches better than... There's too many matches to remember these days, but there's so many. And as I say, I was in a rush, so I pretty much only stuck to the 80s and 90s. Bret versus Owen, WrestleMania 10. Bret versus Owen on the Action Zone. Randy Savage versus Crush at WrestleMania 10, which is a great match, and people never talk about that. Bret versus Bulldog, In Your House 5. Shawn Michaels versus Diesel, that was Good Friends, Better Enemies, In Your House. Canadian Stampede main event. I mean, that's a 5-star match of anybody's money, surely. The No Way Out 98 8-man tag team match, if people remember that in Texas. Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, Hell in a Cell. Performance-wise, that is as 5-star as it gets. Undertaker versus Mankind, Hell in a Cell. In my opinion, most Goldberg matches up until he wins the world title, and then they monkey with the Goldberg formula, and it's not the same. I loved Goldberg. And I love squash matches. They're 5-star matches, superstars. Pretty much every superstars was wonderful to me. You had a match that was 2 minutes long if you were lucky, and you saw your finishes and you moved on to the next one. I love that format. I don't have ADHD, but I love the 1 hour format where you showcase your stars, you have the promos, you see what the most important angle was of the week, of the last 6 weeks, because they just repeat things ad nauseum, then you move on to the next episode. I love that. Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat, pick one. SummerSlam 93, Bret Hart versus Doink the Clown, and then Jerry Lawler. Fantastic finish. CM Punk versus John Cena. Shawn Michaels versus Jeff Jarrett, In Your House 2. Steve Austin versus The Rock, WrestleMania 17. People remember the finish. People forget that was a fantastic match. Many of World of Sport matches, All-Star and that kind of thing. So many of them are fantastic matches that don't get remembered. Like your Rollerball Roccos, or one of my personal favourites that nobody remembers, a guy called Johnny England. He did some great matches after about 10 minutes of hitting a bicep pose. What else have we got here? Randy Savage versus Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania 5. Road Dogg versus Al Snow in a hardcore match in, I think, the very beginning of 99. Just a great hardcore match. The Royal Rumbles, 91, 92, 97, 99, 2002, 2006. New Foundation versus the Orient Express, Royal Rumble, I think, 92. A great opening match. Bret Hart versus 1-2-3 Kid on Raw. Shawn Michaels versus Tatanka on a random episode of Superstars in 93. Great match. One even better is the Mountie versus Tatanka Superstars 92. That is as pure as an American-style professional wrestling match with all the machinations and stamping on the feet and, just Mountie making an idiot out of himself for 10 minutes straight. It is unbelievable. The Undertaker versus versus Shawn Michaels WrestleMania matches. Shawn Michaels versus Flair. Many of Bryan Danielson's matches, I'm a big fan. Roddy Piper versus Goldust, WrestleMania 12. Bret Hart versus Chris Benoit, the Owen Hart Memorial match in WCW. Dynamite Kid versus Tiger Mask. People don't appreciate that match anywhere near as much as they should do because it's a high-flying match. They generally don't age as well, but this one has everything. Everything is within the framework of logic still as a high-flying match. It's great. Another one that you thought about putting on the list, I think, Randy Savage versus Ultimate Warrior, WrestleMania 7. The emotions, the hugging of Liz afterwards was fantastically put together. A couple of random ones. Steiner Brothers versus the Heavenly Bodies. Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka from ECW One Night Stand. I would have written 1,000 more if I had the time.
This is an excellent problem to have. And anybody that didn't watch any of these matches, I remember a lot of them. Like I said, there's so many 5-star matches, whether, I would put Goldberg and Hogan from the Georgia Dome, which the reason why that didn't make it, you build it up for 3 days, maybe 4 days. See, the criteria eliminates a lot of these, but my heart says each and every one of these, Shawn Michaels versus Diesel, one was the In Your House was better than the WrestleMania 11 match. Bret versus Diesel, I think, was an In Your House match. In Your House was one of the most underrated pay-per-view themes out there. There were great matches. Bret versus 1-2-3 Kid is probably the most, if you're a wrestling school trainee or somebody wanting to go to wrestling school, fundamentally, technically, pacing, what to do, what not to do. Bret versus X-Pac, Shawn Waltman, 1-2-3 Kid is your match to study. That's why I look at it. You got a young guy, you got a veteran. Brett's leading X-Pac, 1-2-3 Kid through this, and 1-2-3 Kid is carrying his weight based off of that. And he proved to himself in that match because he could have been a one-hit wonder like a Barry Horowitz who went over on Chris Candido, Skip, with the Body Donnas, but his career kind of like hovered and went back down. After the Razor Ramon surprise finish on Raw, where Kid went over, his work, he started to show, I belong here, and I belong to be elevated. I deserve to be elevated. So good on him for that. I would put in also, what was the mounting match that he won the Intercontinental title? That was an excellent match as well. Then there was, I've got to finish this thought. The Mountie got locked up in New York City jail against Big Boss Man at that pay-per-view. That storyline was awesome. A tale as old as time. Crooked Cop versus Honest Cop. The old Serpico match.
Mm-hmm. Just because you mentioned it before, I think Brett versus Diesel, the one where Brett wins the title back, is Survivor Series 95, and then the month after he wrestles Bulldog, which is the one I mentioned. What was the other question? Where Mountie wins the IC title. That was like was that Madison Square Garden or another house show? Yeah, and then Brett had to claim he had 104-degree temperature, but he didn't. But that wasn't like a traditionally. That was like a single camera kind of thing at a house show. That one.
Yeah, the Hollywood Backlot Brawl at Piper and Goldust. That was amazing, and that was about as real as it got. Goldust he got messed up. Oh, the Shawn Michaels Diesel in your house, where he used the Shawn's leg. Is that the one you put down?
Oh yeah.
In your house, man. That's an underappreciated. And then in your house, for people who don't know the history, the first one, they literally gave away a house as a prize. That was a cool concept.
Do you know what happened to the house?
It was built like crap.
No. The kid, it was a kid. He was like 9 or 11 or something like that. He sold it the next year for something like $175,000.
And then he became the CEO of BlackRock. Years and years later.
He's currently in jail now.
Anything else? I also want to mention, because of all the criteria that I mentioned before, it wasn't a particularly great match, but Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 14, it did get everybody over in a match because Shawn was meant to turn back up later on down the line, but it took a lot longer than usual. Fan anticipation, fantastic, drawing huge money on the day. That pay-per-view did bonanza business, especially with Mike Tyson involved.
You want to talk about pain, never over. I mean, that was like the nail in the coffin for WCW, the beginning of nailing the coffin, getting Tyson. You couldn't have paid him enough. You got your return off of that. Mike did a great job, man. That was the first celebrity I saw in a long time, maybe ever, that actually took their spot seriously. And didn't treat it like they were the local DJ at the indie show doing a tag match.
Yeah, it would have been the same if Pee Wee Herman had turned up and did it.
You know what?
Or Jerry Piven.
Oh, Summerfest. I love it.
Yeah, and long-term company growth as well. I'd figure that maybe is one of the only matches. You can say The Rock and John Cena as well, I guess, would be a great build-up. And I think John Cena and The Rock, one of the two pay-per-views, I think the first one, 2012, that still holds the record for the highest buy rate in WWE history, wrestling history.
I would put the Punk and Cena, and I had it there. I had most of these matches in there. It would have been 30. The Punk and Cena Money in the Bank match, Chicago, once again. Drew a big house. Punk drew that house with Cena because it's hometown. Won the title. The actual match was technically a 5-star match. We'll see what Meltzer says about it. But what they did afterwards eliminated it from my criteria because, as I've said before, you can have Punk saying he's the real world champion, going to independence, showing up when he's not supposed to, not being part of the company or the roster, causing chaos everywhere. Like when he went to San Diego Comic-Con and crashed the panel. They did it for 2 to 3 weeks, and he just comes back on TV. So for drawing money in the historical reference, they completely squashed it months too early. Punk could have just been a free agent for 6 months until he just could have did so many more things, and he did nothing with that.
It's also unappreciated his feud with John Laurinaitis, because let me tell you, when he would come out, when CM Punk would come out, those people went, I won't say Steve Austin level, but it's close enough every single week when Punk came out as champion and he was facing John Laurinaitis. And then what do? You turn Punk heel. Hey, why not?
What do you think? Do you think there's actually going to be any kind of hope that there will be Punk versus Austin at WrestleMania? They've talked about it for God knows how long. They're both not getting any younger, but Punk looks great. Austin looks great. And he had that great match with Kevin Owens. You can call that a 5-star match, but the build-up sucked. They didn't really lock it in until 2 weeks before.
Well, we didn't even know it was a match. We sort of figured it out, but in fact, we didn't even know that was going to be a match. We didn't know if it was going to be an extended segment with a brawl. And it's never quite the same if it's an extended segment with the brawl, even if they do the exact same moves within. Unless that bell rings, and then bell rings and the referee counts 3 or whatever, it's not the same. And it's just a little thing, but it makes all the difference. I think Steve Austin subverted everybody's expectations in the most positive way imaginable, because I didn't think we'd be getting a 10-minute match or whatever it went to. And I didn't think he'd be that good. I didn't think he'd do anywhere near as much as he did. And I know he's wearing a t-shirt and everything, but he looked as great as someone in that spot and of that age, and with those expectations could possibly look.
I guess Steve has the same body dysmorphia I have, because with the way his arms and shoulders looked, I had no doubt he'd have a 6-pack. But maybe he just didn't think I'm not as big as I used to be. But dude, he's shredded, man. He looks great. Him and Kurt could almost be twins at this point with the kind of shed. I mean, nobody. Kurt is like an action figure, but Steve's not far behind him.
There's a photo. We'll get on to Dave Meltzer in a bit, and then we'll do what went right afterwards. But there's a photo I saw really recently of Kurt Angle. He's he's wearing a vest, sleeveless t-shirt, whatever you want to call it, and his arm, what is he, 50-something now? The sinew in his shoulder. It's outrageous how cut he looks. I mean, he sort of had that vacant stare, in the meme with Kurt Angle. He had the Kurt Angle vacant meme stare going. But then but I didn't even look at his face. I was looking at his arms.
I've stood across from the worked version of that, and it feels like the shoot version of Kurt Angle staring you down. Please don't look at me, Kurt. Look over there for a second. But by the way, the funny thing is, there's the saying, all show and no go. He's all show and even more go. He probably can move even better now, which means you don't have to do anything. I will just lay down and you can pin me.
Yeah, the US didn't get a single gold medal in the men's Olympic wrestling events as well, so they need to go back and have a look at what Kurt Angle looks like now, as far as intensity and intelligence and whatever, and study his '96 run, because that dude was just and probably still is to a point.
And we will dedicate an entire episode to Kurt. We're not trolling him by leaving him out of 5-star matches, but I believe Kurt Angle absolutely positively deserves an entire series on him. Is Kurt in the Hall of Fame? I don't think so.
That's a great question. I don't think so. No, he is. He definitely is, because I remember at the end he does that milk thing and.
Oh, that's right. Well, they need to make it more memorable, because if here we go. You didn't know that. You didn't know that.
There's too many people in. There's too many people.
There's going to be too many people in when I get in. That's when you're going to know. No, we've gone too far. We've lowered the bar way too much, and you love when I put myself down.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, we're going to actually move on, because we're talking about Kurt Angle. We're actually going to be talking about the nature of 5-star matches as popularized by Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And Kurt Angle never had a 5-star match. That is the thing that has been known since Kurt Angle retired, but it's really picked up steam recently as to denigrate, if you like that word. I know you're not Dutch, but I'm using the Dutch thing. The reputation or the rating skills of Dave Meltzer. So, Let's talk about Bret and Shawn arguably being the best two wrestlers of the 1990s. Some would say one or both are in contention for the greatest wrestlers of all time. I'd always put Bret, but neither are in Dave Meltzer's exclusive list of wrestlers with 3 or more 5-star matches. Bret has had 2, one versus Owen at WrestleMania 10 and Austin at WrestleMania 13, and Shawn has had 2, Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10 and The Undertaker versus The Undertaker at the first Hell in a Cell. So among the wrestlers who have been part of at least one 5-star match, and these are all, for the most part, multi-man matches, admittedly, are the Bushwhackers, who were actually the Sheepherders. That was versus the Fantastics. The Big Boss Man, Sid Vicious, Giant Baba, in 94 no less, Johnny Ace Twice, EC3, along with Lars Sullivan and Velveteen Dream as well. I think they were all in the same match. I think it might have been like an NXT ladder match.
Oh, that was that North American title match. I don't know if they did in the Philly. That was Andrade versus Johnny Gargano.
Yeah.
It was a big multi-man match. So a lot of people have got 5-star matches Kurt Angle doesn't have. So because of the crashing of the Japanese wrestling market, there were only 7 5-star matches handed out in the decade of the 2000s. 67 5-star plus matches, we should always put that on, in the 2010s. And in the 2020s, there have already been 95 5-star or higher ranked matches in the 2020s. So in history, as of July 2024, New Japan Pro Wrestling has 97 5-star or better matches, All Japan 37, AEW 32, WWE just 19. In the entire history of WWE and AEW's not far off doubling it, tied and 19 ties with All Japan Women. WCW received 7, Ring of Honor has received 7, AAA has received 6, PWG, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, 5, TNA 3, and ECW 1.
My guess is Malenko Guerrero is the ECW 1, and then what was the TNA 1 should be the 3-way dance between Daniels, AJ, and Joe. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think that was one of them. The ECW one was actually Juventud Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio Jr.
It was a good match. That was a very good match. I mean, we brought in Lucha Libre. They had Conan there at the time and a lot of other people coming through. I would do the opposite. I think what we're showing is the matches from the past had more of a 5-star kind of like, viewpoint of what they drew and everything like that. I don't know. Cody and Roman, I think that's something that should be considered for the money it drew, the quality of the match, the storyline, the people that got over in that orbit of the storyline. I don't think he got much better than that in modern history, but he's entitled to his opinion with that. But here's what I would ask wrestlers, and Al's brought this up, every wrestler's brought this up. How does having a 5-star man, I could be told I'm wrong because I don't know way AEW works. How much does your pay go up after receiving a 5-star match? What kind of cash bonus do you get for getting a 5-star match? My assumption maybe with Tony Khan, you do get bonused for getting a 5-star match in AEW. That could be the truth. But what does it do? This is where it becomes very dangerous with wrestlers. Wrestlers, even myself and everybody that's gotten into the business, has an ego. You have to. You have to have an ego and believe that you can be the best at what you want to do, the best at what you dream to do. But you also have to be very hard on yourself. I do it in a joking way, but it's checks and balances to keep me honest and keep me trying to improve everything I do. These 5-star match things, and I know I've heard in AEW locker rooms, they're like, what did Meltzer give you? What did he give you for a right? It doesn't matter. Punk famously said during a recent interview, I might get the quote wrong, but I'm paraphrasing. He goes, I would rather be in a full building drawing money and get not a 5-star match, or do you want a 5-star match in a building that's a quarter full? I think it was the Ariel Helwani interview. He said that.
It was something to the effect of AEW and WWE aren't in the same business. As I say, this isn't knocking AEW, but it's sort of like a perfect example of 5-star matches.
AEW business.
Oh, I
how
think
many
what
did
it's
I
trying to
say?
do, and
95?
I'm sorry to interrupt. What I'm trying to do with this kind of mindset is tell younger wrestlers or even wrestlers that might be my age that it means something to them. Those 5-star matches mean nothing for your bank account, for your investments, for your retirement, for your health and safety. Because I don't want anybody going out there trying to kill themselves just to get a person's opinion, star rating, mine or anybody else's. Like if I say that was a 5-star match, but please don't kill yourself next time, that's what I would put in the asterisk. Or it really does give. I mean, Kota Ibushi is an amazing worker. Him and some people over in New Japan, I think he had some matches with Omega, as a matter of fact. And when they tagged up as the Golden Lovers, they were entertaining. They had characters, and they could also go and have very exciting matches. But how much money did those star matches or whatever Kota Ibushi versus Cedric Alexander, Cruiserweight Classic, one of my favorite matches to watch while doing cardio. Why do I watch it during cardio? The pacing, the excitement, I get my heart break, but I'm not thinking and appreciating anything. It's a stunt show. It's a stunt show I could never do. I don't have the athletic ability any of those people do, but it doesn't leave me with a lasting moment. If you ask me right now, I don't remember one spot in that match or what the match was even for, except the Cruiserweight Classic. That's it. So I would caution any young wrestler out there. It's great to have the opinion or the adulation, a positive opinion of anybody who's paid to observe the business. But they aren't going to be there to feed your family after, God forbid, you break your neck.
AEW business is down despite 32 5-star or better matches. And I think that's a good example. Obviously, there's a joke with Dave Meltzer saying, oh, well, he wasn't in the Tokyo Dome, so therefore it couldn't be 5 stars, etc. And he has given a lot of 5 stars or better to New Japan or Japanese promotions in general. But I think that really highlights the difference between Japan and the US. Because I think with Japan, it's more important. The matches are more important than the story leading up to it. I'm sure there's a lot of story leading up to it as well in various main events and big shows at Tokyo Dome or wherever else it may be. But ultimately over here, 5-star matches people just get sick of them a lot easier. Or what people what the Dave Meltzers or certain people on the internet, whatever, deem a 5-star or better match is. And I think AEW's found this, they put in, so many great matches on TV for free. And after so long, it just doesn't matter anymore. And you're just watching it, and as you say, you're just watching motion for the sake of motion. At the end of it, it leaves you cold. And then you just, I might watch next week, I might not. Because you, at some point, you reach your fill. Whereas with storylines, boxing is a great example. I mean, how many, I don't know if you're a big boxing fan or UFC or whatever, but your Chuck Liddells and your Tito Ortiz, and the old Brock Lesnar is a great example of somebody who just goes in there, has an aura, has story behind him, cuts great promos, punching doors because he's pissed off because Frank Mir said something that he perceived as a slight, and then you can't wait to see them smash each other. But they weren't great matches. The reason why the fans are reacting isn't because they're 5-star UFC matches. They were never match of the year. You want to see who was going to die in the ring that night, or who's or who would get redemption, and that's what keeps bringing people back.
Well, I would argue a little bit with that because the fight of the night is kind of like that Dave Meltzer 5-star thing. If Dana White feels you had fight of the night, so guys are kind of tripping over themselves trying to perform to impress Dana White for the bonus, but it's for money. It's not for the 5-star matches. Don't even give you a trophy. So I'll give you an example. This is probably the perfect example, and I think the world of the guy as a person because I spent time with him in TNA when he first came to America. Okada in Japan. How many years upon year? I mean, almost a decade of just rolling New Japan Pro Wrestling, right? He was IWGP. He was undefeated. He had the longest reign. I might be getting some of that, but Okada was basically the dude beating everybody, becoming, what do they call it? The ace of New Japan, like Tanahashi was for a while. I think he became it again. At least that has some connotation for, okay, there's something to being the top guy. All right, Okada had all these great matches, had all this an immense push that I hadn't seen in New Japan in quite some time. He comes to AEW, the most over he is when he's pushing the button wrong and goes, "So sorry," and the people pop. So if all that stuff he did in New Japan was so great, why are you turning it into a comedy act that he fans himself after just seeing Sasha Banks in the hallway? You're turning this guy into a joke. So where are all these 5, 6, 7-star matches? I'm not saying he can't do it, but yeah, and you're paying him multiple millions of dollars a year. So how does that translate into drawing money? And why does Tony Khan, who loves 5-star matches, New Japan, strong style, dream matches, why is this dude not having, now he might be hurt, I don't know, but why is this dude not wrestling if he's the 5-star match machine?
He's a very interesting subject to go from the guy who's known for, let me have a look, the highest rating 7 stars, 13 5-star or better matches, only trailing behind Will Ospreay in the Wrestling Observer. He's a very interesting subject because he's paid, I don't know, let's guess between $2-3 million a year to be brought over and be the Young Bucks lackey, essentially.
In TNA, they made him Kato. And I don't agree with that because I wrestled Okada, which everybody's angry that I beat him on TNA Explosion. So if you want to go watch it and leave a negative comment, go ahead. It's something, and by the way, just a little history behind that. I was going to be charged with teaching Okada American-style wrestling. Alex Shelley, Chris Sabin, the Bucks, other people thought I could really mix what he had in with that. That's one of the reasons why we had that match. But I had a few conversations, and one of the nicest guys I've ever met, one of the coolest guys for the short time I was around him. But yeah, why? Like, that was something where people were getting mad that TNA turned him into that. I think it was with Samoa Joe as Kato. But you essentially have him being Kato without the mask here in 8. Is that a good kind of one-on-one analogy? You've made him a lackey. You made him a sidekick. And the dude's good enough to stand on his own. Dude, it doesn't have a t-shirt that says bitch or something? Because he says...
Yeah, that's his new catchphrase, yeah.
He's... How many 5-star plus matches did he have? And now he's the guy who says bitch on TV?
Well, you know what I was saying before? I'm going to come back to Okada and you beating him on TNA Explosion. Don't you worry about that. We're going to mention that in a second. But here's the thing. As I was... Let's get those fans more angry at you. So we have to say, as I was saying before, well, you need more personality, you need more story building up. But the thing is, Okada's a bizarre example of it because he's the guy who's known as the great match machine. And then you put him in a position to give AEW fans absolutely nothing of what they want. Then you give them a catchphrase guy who doesn't wrestle, and he's over to a point. But you sort of, in this way, yeah, fine, he's got more personality than maybe he had in New Japan, or a different kind of personality and more goofy and everything. But you can't draw with it. At least in this guy's, at least in this point, because he's like, what? He's almost like 30th on like the tier of most important wrestlers in AEW, and what, like the 3rd best paid?
And went through some of the roughest matches you'll ever go through that probably took years off his career. His matches are no joke. I mean, they're incredibly physical matches, strong style. If you don't know what strong style is, watch him and Omega. He and Shibata, my God. And that's another dude, real headbutts that almost killed him. What does that get you? And I like Shibata. I like his style. I liked him and Ishii when they had their kind of open weight matches. I'm a great like consumer of all types of wrestling and can appreciate them. But when it comes to maximizing business, maximizing money, things that I didn't know when I was wrestling that I learned towards the tail end of my career, that's why we present it this way. What is a 5-star match? Because I think, for lack of a better term, it's such a false positive. You think 5-star matches equals more money for everybody when actually, in reality, AEW's telling everybody with Okada, those matches mean nothing. We're going to basically turn him into a WWE Ron Simmons damn segment. That's all it is.
You beat Okada. How good was he in 2010? Because this is like, was this his excursion? So he was, pretty much going from young boy to, his first international tour just to get some experience.
Well, you never know what someone's going to be. When he got the Rainmaker gimmick and he got the production behind him and he got the presentation, technically, fundamentally, in the ring, very, very good. Taller guy, too. With most Japanese talent not being, he could do an American style and get over in an American company because even though at the time he was even a little thinner than he is now, he was tall. He was probably as tall as me or maybe even a little bit taller. So with that being said, he can overcome the stereotype of the Tiger Mask or other people that are smaller cruiserweights and stuff. He could wrestle a heavyweight style. I wish we had more matches. It sucked that I wasn't in TNA that much longer after that, but I really would have looked forward to doing something with Okada.
I'm going to give you some more Dave Meltzer 5-star facts here about the rankings and the ratings. That being said, there's a number of huge names and wonderful wrestlers who never received the coveted, or it's coveted for some, I guess, 5-star match. Kurt Angle, the most famous. The Rock. Jake Roberts. Hulk Hogan. Brock Lesnar. Kurt Hennig. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Seth Rollins. Randy Savage. Eddie Guerrero, apparently, is on this list. Dean Malenko, Rob Van Dam, Edge, Randy Orton, Roman Reigns, Mick Foley, Triple H. And here's some real comedy for you. Bryan Danielson never had a 5-star match until he joined AEW. And where in the 2 years he's been with AEW, he's been awarded 8 5-star matches. I mean, right there and then, if somebody says, well, there isn't some sort of bias, whether intentional or not, you're on dog food, pal. How can Bryan Danielson not ever had a 5-star match, and all of a sudden he goes to AEW and he's having one every month?
You wouldn't. I dare anybody to tell me that Bryan Danielson, at the time Daniel Bryan, was ever as over as the Yes Movement going into WrestleMania 30, and then that 3-way match with him, Batista, and Randy Orton, I believe, and going over and having the ultimate WrestleMania moment. You're going to tell me that run there is not a 5-star run paired up with a 5-star match. So I'm not biased. I have criteria. Meltzer has no criteria. He has never put out a 4 to 5 point system of this is what it's based on.
So the 5-star mold was actually broken by Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat at a house show in Landover, Maryland. That's how you spell it, because I want to say Maryland, but you say Maryland, don't you? In 1989, in among their 3-match Big Show series of the same year.
So I don't.
He's even wrong with that. He's even wrong with that. You know why? If you want to pick the Meadowlands that they don't really have footage from '84, it's supposedly the best match they've ever had. Chi-Town Rumble, that pay-per-view with Flair and Steamboat, is a close second to the number 1. 52 minutes, I believe, 2 out of 3 falls, Clash of the Champions in Louisiana. That was the best match Steamboat and Flair ever had. And it's saying something because all their matches are classics, but that was the best one.
You can argue the types like Sergeant Slaughter and Don Canodal versus, I can't remember who it was. Was it the Briscoes or someone else? I can't remember. But
yeah, I think it was Steamboat and Youngblood.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Steamboat and Youngblood. I mean, they were a tag team of some note back in the day. They were having the best matches.
I would say Slaughter versus Hogan at WrestleMania 7, but it didn't draw. They were in a smaller arena. The tickets, the security threat. But the storyline for Hogan and Slaughter at the time, I still stand by that Slaughter is the greatest heel in wrestling history.
So, as I said before, Flair Steamboat at this house show in Landover, Maryland in '89 was given 6 stars. And then that wouldn't happen again. I think there was a facetious one in one of the newsletters where Dave Meltzer gave something 600 and something stars because he loved the match so much, but it was obviously facetious in the joke. Then Okada versus Omega in New Japan, January 4th, 2017, was awarded 6 stars, and that then caused a wave of over 5 stars to be awarded over the coming years, with almost as many 5 plus stars awarded than 5s. I'm going to give you a tweet that Dave Meltzer arguing with a fan 9 hours ago, as I copied and pasted it into my format. This fella, Shursky, says, I mean, not really, though. A max score is no longer 5 stars. Therefore, the scale has changed. 5 is now 77%, assuming that 7 stars is now 100%. Those matches are that much less than the 6 and 6.5 stars. That's an opinion. And then Dave Meltzer says the max score is infinity. 4.75 still means it's a match of the year contender, which it isn't, because there's already been nearly 25-star plus matches rated just in 2024 as of August 14th as we record. So how can a 4.75 compare with a 6-star? You've already rated 20 matches better, so it can't be in the running.
Just the fact we're having this kind of discussion about this argument, this is, for lack of a better term, this is a classic case of narcissism, that you can never be wrong. And I didn't know he was a football fan, American football, to move the goalpost so much. It's fine. It's his right, but you're arguing with people based on your own parameters that you created over decades, and you're changing them. That's the whole thing right there. You're just trying to kind of rehash or recreate or repackage the 5-star match gimmick to be 6, 7, and now infinity. I guess if he was funny, I don't even know Meltzer, and he might be funny, intentionally or unintentionally, he should say, I'm adjusting the stars for inflation. And if everybody would laugh. It's easy as that. Or just let people have their opinion. That's the whole thing. Like, everybody who says that the list I came up with, you can say that we're both idiots, we don't know what we're talking about, we're completely wrong. You can give us your 10 or 12 in the comments or in a community post. We're not going to argue or do anything. It's your opinion. I'm just giving the criteria that is as close to what I believe, the nuts and bolts and the facts on a system that this dude created, that this dude's actually now bastardizing his own system. And when he gets called out on it, he gets mad. Hey, is it just a level of projection, or I don't get it. It's pro wrestling. Why are we even arguing on Twitter about it?
Oh, people haven't got anything better to do. But I love a pointless argument, or I like watching other people pointlessly argue. Here's the thing, though. So originally it was 5 stars at the top, and at the bottom it was minus 5 stars. But an average match was always 2 stars. So in minus 5 stars to plus 5 stars, that must mean, 0 should be average then. That's a 5 out of 10 if there's a 10 ranking numbers. So really, an average match in his mind is 2 stars, which was 7 out of 10, but now it's probably like 5.87 out of 10 somehow with a decimalization out.
I wrestled, so I forget who it was. I don't want to name names unless I know who it is. And there was something in the newsletter, and they came to me, and this was WWE, by the way. And they're like, oh, Meltzer like reviewed our match or something. I was like, oh, whatever. And he goes, well, he said it, quote, good for what it was. And I was happy. And they're like, why are you so happy? He said it was good for what it was. I was like, because we just had a match. So he's saying we had a good match. That's all I got. There was no storyline. There was no, you couldn't break it apart, but he was like, good for what it was. And I was like, that's great. It's a good match. I'm happy.
Is that, all right, the infinity star ratings can go to infinity now, apparently. I mean, that's the stupidest thing in the entire world. So what does any star rating mean? Anything. But here's the big thing. We're arguing about this. We're dedicating partially a show to Dave Meltzer's 5 stars or star ratings. Is there just too much credence? I mean, we don't take them seriously, really, but what percentage of people who are currently in the business working today work for a good star rating from Dave Meltzer?
Well, it seems like a lot. I mean, this is where you talk about last week's episode with steroids and stuff and how I said I'm going to be neutral and borderline apathetic about it because everybody's an adult. They can make their choice. They can do whatever they want. If you choose, as much as I try to, or other people with more experience and I got my viewpoint and mindset a little bit too late in the game to care about money and drawing and what goes into what I do in my profession. But if somebody chooses that that's what gives them any level of satisfaction, a star rating. If you get more satisfaction off a star rating than multi-generational wealth or money or anything like that, we go back to the Brett thing. Kevin Nash has talked about in multiple podcasts about how Brett was the $300,000 a year champion. He cared more about being the champ than making $1 million. He would have took less money to do that. Or actually, Kevin said he did essentially take less money to be champion. You're always going to have people, whether you dress it up as being prideful in what you do and you want to leave a legacy, or being a mark. It could be one or the other. People can choose, and people obviously choose to listen to him, to watch, to read the newsletter, and workers choose to put credence into all that. So who are we to, I'm in a stage of my life where you're not going to convince anybody any differently at this point in their life or career. They're already convinced. They have to learn the hard way themselves if they're going to change their mind. I learned it the hard way. I wasn't into 5-star matches, but I was never going to give this dude. I don't have it in me, Dave, athletically to give you the 5-star match. So, but that's all up to everybody else. And everybody deserves. The market will decide, much like with this show. This show can go 15, 20 episodes. They can get bored. They get tired of hearing my voice. I'm sure people do. And then we'll just fade away. Or the market will decide that this show is not successful. The market over many decades has shown that there's a market to make this guy enough money to live comfortably in California for decades, the most expensive state in the United States. So God bless him.
Here's the one thing, obviously you say it's up to the person, up to the individual or individuals, whether they put credence into Dave Meltzer or anybody else's opinions as far as what is a good match and what isn't. But the one thing that it could hurt, aside from like a booker like Tony Khan, who is booking 4 great matches, in his opinion, rather than building storylines that make sense over a period of time to a big match, etc. This could stretch from indies to the biggest match. If every single person is trying to have the best match on the card, then it's almost to a point that nobody has the best match on the card because, from match 1, match 2, match 3, match 4, everybody's doing the WrestleMania false kick-out finishes, and then by the end match where the people, presumably the people who the fans paid to see, are just doing the exact same thing as everybody else on the card. So in that sense, it can be damaging. Is that right or wrong?
No, it's absolutely right. And I think this is an excellent whiteboard segment for a future episode, maybe even as early as next week. I would love to explain the psychology of a wrestling card, of a wrestling show. There's psychology within the match, but each and every match is important. Even a popcorn match after intermission serves its purpose. The opening match serves a purpose. And really, in a lot of ways, these earlier matches or that popcorn match is meant to keep the people engaged, keep them interested, keep them warmed up, but not heat them up so much that they're exhausted for the main event. In other words, leaving out punches, leaving out violence, leaving out hardcore stuff, leaving out a lot of things to where you save it for the match that drew the ticket money, drew the crowds, drew the gate, and drew the pay-per-view buys. I think that would make an excellent whiteboard segment.
Okay, then. So just before we close down the show, I'm going to put this counterpoint to you, Stevie. So a 5-star match, you say you've got all the criteria. You've got the build-up, you've got the reaction, you've got the match quality itself. Did it increase ticket sales, etc.? But here's the thing. Some might say, and it's a very, very fair question, is that, well, that must mean that Titanic or Avatar is the greatest film of all time. Because if wrestling is art, and a lot of people say that pro wrestling is an art, films are a form of art, music, that kind of thing. But Avatar drew the most, adjusted for inflation. So therefore, Avatar must be the greatest film of all time, which, in my opinion, is nowhere close. So how do you... Or McDonald's has the best burgers because they sell the most. It's that kind of argument. So where do you fall on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because you have two different viewpoints. Now, people within Hollywood or acting or, the people that take great pride in great acting will have a different list than your moviegoer. Like Deadpool and Wolverine is a $1 billion movie right now, and it's probably going to hit $2 billion. So it's outdrawn any other Marvel movie quickly. I mean, they might not get the totals than other ones, but dare I say, on Marvel movies, some of them aren't that great, but drew hundreds of millions of dollars. So you got to also with wrestling, there's all these different demographics. So Russo always says casual fan, or older wrestlers, maybe Dutch has said, you have to appeal to the lowest common denominator and spoon feed people to a certain degree. You can have, matches on the show that's why Nitro was so great. It had cruiserweights, it had WWE style, it had some hardcore stuff. For a while, they were doing the variety show correctly. I think that's the strength of wrestling. You might say, well, Hogan and Warrior wasn't a 5-star match, or well, let's say this, Hogan and Andre wasn't a 5-star match, but Steamboat and Savage was a 5-star match. Here's my next question. Did you enjoy WrestleMania 3? Oh, yeah. Show was awesome. Then they both played their part. I would say even there was these matches in the beginning, and then WrestleMania 8 was a double main event. So what really drew the money? Savage and Flair, which I would say that's a 5-star match. Or Hogan and Sid, which was just a different style presented a different way. Piper versus Brett for the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 8. I can consider that a 5-star match. But would I say, well, you liked Flair and Savage, therefore you're going to shut your TV off and not see Sid and Hogan? No, you liked WrestleMania 8. So the Avatar or other movies and other things, you can put them in certain categories, but I still say tons of people watched the movie. I personally didn't like Avatar. It was too long. Like Kevin Nash says, I don't want to sit through something where I got to wear a catheter. So, but it's all opinion based. My thing is where we're getting into a little bit of dangerous territory is, what if there was a movie critic that could control the Marvel franchise and say, I don't like Tony Stark as Dr. Doom. And then Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers say, oh my God, this one person doesn't like Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom. We have to fire him and recast him. That's a bridge too far right there. So that's the beautiful part about this show and 100 others and anybody that has an opinion about pro wrestling. You can have your favorites and you have one. I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, but there's things that just speak to my heart. And like I said earlier, I had to eliminate a lot of the matches that are near and dear to my heart and bring out that bias by using these 4 pieces of criteria. I had to battle myself. Oh, man, I really like Punk and Joe in ROH. That was like the 3 matches they had. That was the reason I wanted to go to ROH. I was going to wrestle Punk. I went into a place in Connecticut and he tried to throw the Polish hammer at me and I ducked and kicked. That was after the Chris Masters thing. So I have things that I could quite honestly look at and say, and Chris Daniels is a friend of mine. Joe's a friend of mine. AJ and I are friendly. I would have loved to give that match a place on the list, but it drew the same crowd at Universal Studios. It didn't draw money. I liked the match. So everybody's going to have a bias. Everybody's going to like something, dislike it, and that's the beauty of it. So I don't know if that gives a definitive answer, but I picked the ones, some of them I wanted to pick, and some of them I actually had to pick based upon the nuts and bolts.
You mentioned WCW and the way it was booked, and the best parts for the cruiserweights one day, and then the heavyweights and the tag match, and it was something for everyone. And it reminds me of the fact that Kevin Sullivan was the one who booked some of WCW's best shows in the late 90s, or, 96, 97, around that time, who we just lost last week as we record this. WWE did a very nice tribute video to him. He was mentioned, I think, like is it Boston Red Sox baseball? I think they made mention of him, and he's been given some like mainstream coverage as well with his passing, and a huge amount of wrestlers in the business and fans who, especially in Florida, who when they were kids and they saw Kevin Sullivan as one of the most terrifying people in the entire world, remember him very, very vividly indeed. I know you met and spoke with and hung about with Kevin Sullivan here and everywhere. So to close out the show, any memories of Kevin that you would like to add?
Yeah, same thing. I wasn't even say 10, 20, 30 years in the business coming across paths or crossing paths with Kevin Sullivan. I had the same thought of the people who grew up in Florida. I was like, that's the devil. Oh my God. And he's still, like I said, there's guys that just have that natural intensity aura around them. And he's one of those guys. I enjoyed talking sports. I especially enjoyed asking him about his powerlifting days. He used to own a gym down in Marathon, Florida called Froggy's way back in the day. And we were talking about working out and his split and how he would train. And he was a monster, dude. He was a legitimate, power lifter. I think he competed at one point, too, maybe before his wrestling career, maybe during the early days. But you take one look at him and say, yeah, deadlifter, squat, all that's his lower body. He was definitely built to be a power wrestler. And while looking at his technical stuff in the ring and the way he worked and everything, it worked for him, but he wasn't particularly a great wrestler, but he was a great worker because of his psychology. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the 5-star match stuff, the psychology, the storyline. And it was a natural fit for Kevin to become a booker in multiple places, especially WCW. I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that WWE never hired him as a booker or as a creative mind.
Because Benoit was there, I suspect.
Well, we can get into that on a different episode, but I think all that stuff was already, he had said in some interviews, if I'm saying it correctly, that they were already apart. They were already separated. It was already essentially over when that happened. So I don't know how now, obviously they were married for many years, and this is a very touchy situation in a locker room, and you got a guy in charge, but he's also a talent. Then you got that. But I think they're, what was it, a hardcore match in Baltimore, Maryland, Great American Bash, I believe, when they went into the bathrooms. And dude, you want to tell, they got it out of their system. If they had any ill will, that match, they got it out of their system. And that was about as real as it can get. But they were professional too at the same time. Nobody crippled anybody, but I don't think they were taking care of each other too much in that match.
There's more than one as well where they went to the backstage area. I think there's one on Nitro, and then they just did it the next week on pay-per-view because people liked it so much. We're going to end it there then, because if nothing else, I've got to run off very, very quickly. So everybody, thank you so much for watching the Stevie Richards Show. You can catch us every single Friday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast media. For now, I don't know what we're going to be doing next week. I think we were starting to get to the point where we were teasing next week. We may do merchandise. We may do wrestling figures. We may do something like that. So that's a sort of partial tease for what we're going to be doing. But for now, everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you again next week.